I have run the Alderton Playhouse end-of-season gala for 38 years, and in that time I have learned to read a room the way a doctor reads a face. The flush of too much wine, the tight smile of a man who would rather be home. The particular brightness that means someone is about to say something they will regret. I was reading the room that way on the Friday evening in March when Harlan Voss, the most celebrated conductor to visit our little theater society in a decade, decided to make sport of the boy collecting empty glasses near the piano. I should tell you about Finn Gallagher, because the room certainly hadn't bothered to. He was 23 that spring. A slight young man with dark eyes and the careful, contained posture of someone who had learned not to take up too much space. He had arrived at the Alderton 6 months earlier, responding to an advertisement for front-of-house staff, and had said almost nothing about himself in the interview beyond the fact that he was glad to have the work. Our house manager, a thorough woman named Sylvia, had noted in her log that he had listed 2 years at a drama conservatory under previous experience, then crossed it out and written various instead. She had hired him anyway. He was punctual, courteous, careful with the patrons, and he never asked for anything. In the hierarchy of an evening like this one, 40 guests in black tie, caterers moving between them, a visiting maestro holding court by the window, Finn was invisible. That is not a criticism. Invisibility in service work is a skill. He had mastered it. What none of us knew, what I suspect Finn himself had nearly persuaded himself to forget, was that he had been playing the piano since he was 7 years old. The Bosendorfer upright in the green room was a period piece, a 70-year-old instrument that the society kept tuned more out of sentiment than use. It stood against the far wall beneath a portrait of the theater's founding patron, and on gala evenings it served chiefly as a surface for champagne flutes. Finn had been quietly clearing those flutes, making himself useful, making himself small, when Maestro Voss turned from his conversation and noticed him. Harlan Voss was 64, silver-haired, and accustomed to being the most consequential person in any room he entered. He had conducted orchestras on 4 continents and was spending 3 weeks with our regional society as a gesture that he made clear. Great subtlety was an act of considerable generosity on his part. He was not a cruel man exactly. He was a man who had spent 40 years being deferred to, and that has a particular effect on the way a person sees the people around him. He looked at Finn, he looked at the piano. He looked back at Finn. "You there," he said, loudly enough that the nearest conversations paused. "The young man with the glasses. Do you play?" Finn went very still. "A little, sir." There was a ripple of polite interest from the guests nearby. Voss smiled, the smile of a man who already knew the punchline. "A little. Well," he gestured at the Bosendorfer with his champagne glass. "Expansive and easy. Try it then. Let's hear what a little looks like." Laughter, gentle and well-mannered, moved around the room. Someone near me murmured something I didn't catch. Finn set down his tray on the sideboard. He did it slowly, without hurry, as if he were simply completing a task before moving on to the next one. He crossed to the piano bench, straightened it a quarter inch, and sat down. The room settled into an expectant, slightly amused quiet. He placed his hands on the keys and sat for a moment without moving, eyes down. I remember thinking he was frightened. I have thought about that since, and I am no longer sure. I think he was listening for something inside himself. Something he had packed away a long time ago, and was now carefully unpacking. Then he began to play. The piece was a revel, a pavane, slow and grave, the kind of music that arrives like a letter from somewhere very far away. He played the opening phrase with such plainness, such complete absence of performance, that for the first 3 bars the room continued to murmur at its edges. Then it didn't. The murmuring stopped the way a river stops when it drops over a falls. All at once, completely, and with no announcement. I watched Harlan Voss. I have thought about this too. He had turned back to his conversation when Finn began. He was still half-turned when the room went quiet. He completed his turn slowly, the way a man turns when he has heard something he is not certain he heard correctly, and he looked at the boy at the piano. The revel lasted 4 minutes. Finn played every bar of it from memory, without visible effort, the left hand patient and steady beneath a right hand that was doing something with the melody that I cannot fully describe, shaping each phrase, like a question, holding the final note of each line a fraction longer than strict time would allow, so that the silence before the next phrase felt inhabited. The room was absolutely still. Even the caterers, professional as they were, stopped moving. When the last chord faded, no one spoke for a moment. Then someone near the door began to applaud, and the rest of the room joined. Warmly, genuinely, the applause of people who had received something they had not expected and were grateful for it. Finn did not acknowledge the applause. He sat for 2 or 3 seconds, hands still resting on the keys, and then, without lifting them, he began to play again. This second piece was his own. I knew it immediately, because it had none of the architecture of received music, no familiar cadence, no quoted phrase. It began with a single repeated note in the bass, soft and patient, like a bell counted from a long distance, and over it the right hand began to build a melody that was almost too simple to be called a melody at first. A handful of tones arranged with such care that each one landed somewhere specific, not in the room, in the chest. The music moved through 3 or 4 passages, each one widening slightly, the bass note shifting once, twice, the melody circling back to its opening phrase, but altered. The same words, a different sentence. There was something in it of parting, of long distances, of the particular grief that has no object, only a quality, a color. I am a theater man. I have sat through 10,000 performances. I know the difference between a thing that is crafted to move you and a thing that simply does. This simply did. I looked around the room. The woman beside me had both hands pressed to her mouth. The society's vice chairman, a retired solicitor not given to sentiment, was staring at the portrait above the piano with a fixed gaze that had nothing to do with the portrait. Near the door I could see one of the caterers standing very straight with her eyes closed, and Harlan Voss. Harlan Voss had stood on the stages of the world's great concert halls and commanded the music of the dead masters. Harlan Voss was standing completely, still with his glass at his side, watching the boy at the piano, with an expression I had not seen on his face in 3 weeks. He was not smiling. He was not performing attention. He was simply attending the way a person attends when the thing in front of them has taken something back from them they forgot they had given away. Finn held the final note. He held it until it was gone, until there was nothing left of it, but the memory of the sound. And then he lifted his hands and placed them in his lap. The silence lasted 4 or 5 seconds. It felt much longer. Then the room stood up. Not all at once, it moved in a wave, the way a real thing moves. The woman beside me first, then the vice chairman, then the guests near the door, and then the rest of them. And the applause was not the polite, well-mannered sound that had greeted the Ravel. It was the other kind, the kind that a room produces when it has been reminded, without warning, of something it loves about being alive. Finn sat still through it. He was not performing modesty. He seemed genuinely uncertain what to do with a room that was looking at him. After a moment he stood, because there was nothing else to do, and he nodded. A single small nod, the gesture of a man who is thanking the room rather than accepting its thanks. I watched Harlan Voss through all of this. He had not moved. He had not joined the applause immediately the way the others had. He had stood, glass still at his side, through the entire ovation. Then, when the room began to settle, when people were turning to their neighbors with the bright, unsettled faces of those who have witnessed something, he moved. He crossed the green room floor. He crossed it slowly and directly, the way a man moves when he has decided to do something, and the decision has already cost him something. He stopped in front of Finn. Finn looked up at him. Neither of them spoke. Voss extended his hand. Finn took it. That was all. No words. The room saw it and understood it, and the applause came again, softer this time, and then it fell away, and the gala resumed around them as galas do. Conversation restarting, glasses refilling, the caterers moving again. But the room was different. It is always different after something true has happened in it. Furniture is the same. The air is the same. Something else is not. I did not speak to Finn that evening. I did not know what to say, and I hid the sense that anything I might offer would be insufficient. The way words are always insufficient, when the music has already said the thing exactly. I watched him collect his tray from the sideboard and resume his rounds, moving through the room in the same quiet way he always did, except that now people smiled at him when he passed. and one or two said something to him in a low voice, and he received each of these with the same careful, contained courtesy he brought to everything. I have been asked, since whether I knew, whether I had any sense in the 6 months he had worked for us, of what was in him. I did not. That is the honest answer. I had looked at Finn Gallagher for 6 months and I had seen a young man who was good at being invisible. I had not looked any further than that. 38 years in the theater, and I still needed a Friday evening in March to remind me that the thing you are looking for is almost never wearing the right clothes.